Mitchell. I'm here at the Becker County Museum, and we have a really exciting exhibit opening today. This is April 10th, 2025. And Hans, maybe we'll start with you. You want to give us a quick, I'll give the history, but why don't you give a quick, what are we looking at behind us here?
So we are looking at the remains of a bison that were, the bones actually of bison that were found north of Frazee about 5 years ago. And they came to the donated museum. I'll let you talk about that. But then I created this exhibit for this.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful. So the story is a gentleman found these bones in a peat bog outside of Frazee. And he knew right away that he had something unique and interesting because there was some cartilage intact on these bones. And he sent some samples off to the state archaeologist office. They actually confirmed they're several hundreds of years old and very unique because of that cartilage. It isn't really necessarily all that unique to find bones, of course.
No.
But the cartilage really kind of upped the level of intrigue. And so their recommendation was to donate them to a museum. So he contacted us, and we knew that would be a very unique opportunity for our museum to showcase a bit of natural science history.
Yes.
And I reached out to Hans, and then the wheels started turning, so to speak.
Right. When we initially talked when we saw the bones, the guy that discovered them had thought there were maybe 3 bison, but it turns out there's only 2 adult bulls that actually died within the peat bog. And I think the interesting thing that we all talked about was it's we've all seen skeletons, we've all seen bones, and skeletons don't walk around by themselves. So how about let's focus on the peat bog? I mean, there's more intrigue about the peat bog. And then talking to some locals up at Lakes Processing, the Bachmans actually have the peat bog on the other side of where these bison are discovered. And you learn more about the history of a peat bog. It's really fascinating because we have them just outside of town. And we probably drive by these things not knowing what we're looking at. They're grasslands, or maybe they're woodlands. We think they're swamp. We think they're whatever. But actually, there's a lot that goes on within a peat bog. And that became, I think, the subject that you're seeing behind us is why this display shows life now, life then, and life now again with the fish below. Because in high water seasons, the peat bogs actually get saturated and then levitate with the power of the water, and fish will swim underneath it. And that was a really intriguing aspect to the design process of, okay, let's recreate the top, and then here is how to show how the bison might have died, which either had like collapsed through thin ice, or maybe had walked in during the summer open water seasons, not realizing there's like the quicksand kind of part of the peat bog, and it got stuck and then started going down. And of course, being a herd animal, maybe the second animal came in along with it, and they drowned together, and that's where the pose here is showing the bison head up, like if it's drowning, going down. And so basically, we want to create kind of like if you took like a big slab of the peat bog, and then here's what's happening on top. A coyote is hunting a bog lemming, and then here's this bison that's perished, hundreds of years ago, and then there's fish down below, cruising. And at the same time, making 3 different layers, which is kind of fun for kids to see and explore, to make their parents get down low, to see the fish inside, to find the little short-tailed shrew that's in there that's eating a worm, and just fun things that make you kind of want to learn. And then the backside is where we have the exhibit of the second bison with its skull, its jaws, and then Lainey and I, we had to separate out which bones would tell the most story of what makes up a bison and what are kind of the exciting parts of a bison. I'll have Lainey talk more about that with why we pulled different bones to highlight their specifics within the exhibit.
Sure. And from a museum perspective, I mean, it took us, I would say, almost a year to kind of decide on this design. We talked about all sorts of different ideas and how to represent it the best. But from a museum concern, one of my concerns was I didn't want half of this collection to be in this piece. Let's just call it a piece or exhibit, yep. And the other half to say be stored away in boxes in the basement or what have you. I kind of wanted everything contained in one area and to showcase as much as possible. And I would say this is we really thought through every detail of this exhibit. It's amazing. It's fabulous. So.
Yeah, and part of the design process in the early phase was Mary Beth and I went down to Becker, Minnesota, where Stank River Farms, we met with Tom and Gail Barthel, and they kind of sat with us and explained. They've been digging up Bison antiquus, which is the predecessor to the Bison. So today we have Bison. Then we had Bison, and we had Bison antiquus, which are much larger. And they've been digging those up down in Becker, Minnesota, in his peat bog, and working with Mammoth Hot Springs and different paleontologists on that. So we went down and visited with him, and he was one that kind of really described what bison life would have been like, maybe perishing within a peat bog.
Sure. And these, we theorize, these are actually called woodland bison. They're
right, which
much
are smaller. Which are
Yep,
smaller than even, I think, today's bison.
Correct. So Lainey, you have really done the deep dive on peat bogs and identifying like what bones should be showcased. And so tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, to speak to what Hans was mentioning about how we spent an afternoon deciding which kind of which of the bison bones to put on the back of the exhibit, we first were looking at, okay, which of the bones showcase what was happening in the peat bog the most. So some of the ones that we pulled out in the niche boxes on the front side of the exhibit here show how the tannins in the peat bog stained the bones and made them look almost tie-dye and just made them a really interesting color. And on the back of the exhibit, we pulled out bones that, yes, are integral to a bison's skeleton, but are also all bones that we also have as humans. So it'll be really interesting to walk up and go, oh my goodness, that bison's femur is the same size as my 2-year-old's entire leg. That's crazy. And things like that. But one of my favorite things that I was able to learn and deep dive on in this process was how integral peat bogs are to just our ecosystems in general. So if you had to guess, how many acres of Minnesota are covered by peat bogs or peatlands?
Hold on. Let me read the graphics you created. There is over 6 million.
Yes, there are
acres
over
in
6
Minnesota.
million acres of peatlands in Minnesota, which is crazy. That's over 10% of our state, which is sizable. And all of those peatlands are integral in making sure that all of the excess carbon that we as humans produce, all of our livestock produce, our peatlands absorb all of that carbon from our environment and keep it from escaping into the atmosphere, which really helps stabilize our climate. Also, Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, the peat bogs also help filter our water and keep our natural waterways clean. So they're super important for not just life here in Minnesota, but life globally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing I really love about this exhibit is that we kind of took it to another level. At the museum, we have the history floor. We're expanding, currently in the process of working on expanding a natural sciences option. This kind of opens that part and kicks that little movement off. But also we have the science floor upstairs. And so we couldn't just stop at this exhibit. We had to add a little interactive component. And so I know you've been working very hard on that as well, Lainey. Why don't you talk about that?
So we have a bunch of 3D printers at the museum, and I've been able to use those to 3D print exact replicas of bison bones. And Hans agreed that we're pretty sure that these are probably Bison antiquus bones because they are larger than the bones that we're seeing in our exhibit here. But that means that since these are 3D printed, they're not ancient bones. You can pick them up, you can handle them. I encourage you to pick them up to see how big they are, to see how the joints fit together and work. And it's great because that's just such an awesome way to make the science and history of a museum tangible for people who are coming in and, are used to not being able to touch things in museums. Please don't touch the exhibit still, though.
Yeah.
You can touch the 3D printed bones, not the real ones.
Right.
Absolutely, and I think, it would have been really great if we had thought about that component a few years ago, so we could have actually scanned all of our own bones. But we literally just thought of that a few weeks ago and tried it out, and it was like, oh, we have to do this, and so we're super excited about that. I just think, this is history, this is science, it's an incredible piece of artwork, filled with a lot of information, and truly this exhibit now has something for everyone, even the littles that want to play with bones.
Well, no, and the whole thing about this exhibit is encouraging people to get outdoors, to explore, because we don't know, sometimes you just never know what's below your feet, and that's what this exhibit shows, is you can be walking through the woods, say like with this coyote, doesn't know what's going on below, and that's what I think it just excites me now to go explore when we know that there's 6 million acres of peat bog. Okay, I want to go learn more about peat bogs.
Absolutely, and they're not all open to the public. But Lainey, where could I go legitimately explore some peat bogs?
Tamarack National Wildlife
Refuge.
Isn't there a national
Yep,
in there? I
is.
thought there was a national in there. So yeah, Tamarack is a great location, very close to us, just up north in Rochert is where the visitor center is. They have great examples of floating and non-floating bogs in their wildlife area that you can explore.
All right.
Very cool.
Any closing thoughts?
No, come out and visit Becker County Museum and go out and explore your local peat bog.
Yeah, and thank you, Hans, for this labor of love that's lasted a few years.
Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, this is kind of going to my past when I worked in museums, so that to get back and roll up the sleeves and figure it out. But to really work with like actual bones has been really a treat, and at the same time very stressful because you can't damage them and you can't like replace them.
Right.
you know?
Right. Exactly.
And so what you are seeing here are the actual bones. And that's why we don't encourage people to touch them, even though it's tempting.
Right.
Yeah, don't touch them.
Right. No touching. So on that note, though, come and visit us. Our updated hours are on our website, which is beckercountyhistory.org.
Yeah.